Hey there, welcome to SaaS Unbound, brought to you by SaaS Group. I'm your host, Anna Dana, and this is the show where we chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business a success. And today with me, an amazing Bridget Harris, the CEO and co-founder of YouCanBookMe, an online scheduling tool that helps businesses manage their customers and calendars. The bootstrap to 5 million ARR.
Mhm.
They're on the list of top 100 software companies on G2.
Mhm.
And I guess I can say advocate for balanced and transparent remote communication, which is just such a game changer right now. And I'm super excited to talk about it and all the other things regarding the business. So welcome, Bridget.
Thanks very much, Anna, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's awesome to have you here. So first of all, and of course, like I did my research, I learned a little bit about what you were doing prior to this, and it's super impressive. I mean, you were working for the government before, and somehow then after working for the House of Lords, no less, you somehow transitioned into SaaS. So, what was the tipping point? Like, what brought you to transitioning to business?
Well, the answer to that is my age, because I'm really old. So as a result, I'm old enough to have had previous careers even before the internet was a thing. And so myself and my co-founder and co-partner in life, Keith, is a software developer or engineer or computer programmer, as we used to call them. And I had a career in politics, as you said. I worked for opposition political parties and local government, and latterly had a job when the Lib Dems were in coalition in the UK government. I was a special advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister, and I did focus on constitutional reform, House of Lords reform, and processes internal to Parliament, like group dynamics in political parties. So I was doing all of that very happily, and Keith was writing software very happily. But around 2003, so obviously this is about 20 years ago, when the cloud, web development, web applications, being able to share your software online in a way that was accessible through a browser became the thing. It was almost a little bit like, not as in rapid progress, but if you imagine how transformational chat GPT now feels like, how AI feels like now. And that sort of, we've all become awakened to that technology in a matter of months. Well, obviously for some people a lot longer, but it's hitting the mainstream now pretty quickly. Well, 20 years ago, that's what the internet felt like. You know, you start very slow, very clunky, and nobody really knows what it's about. And then just so suddenly, you realize you can do everything over the web. You can sell, you can create, you can build, you can provide a service, and indeed you can run a business. And I think that the original intention for us was to do a very honorable, single person made product that would just go out there and live its little freemium life. And me and Keith would be able to buy a house. I think, in fairness, that was probably our original intention, which is just get enough to create a business model inside a web application that would then, see us for the rest of our lives in terms of a little bit of equity. And then we just discovered, as every entrepreneur does, that you just hit a million brick walls. And at that stage, there's a lot of people very reasonably go, that's not for me. I don't want to keep doing that. It was something that I wanted to do, I don't know, just at the point where you decide that you want to stop reading a book because you're just not enjoying it anymore. It's fine. You don't have to keep going. But I think there was something that we persisted in doing that. And that was 20 years ago. And then fast forward 10 years after, we started an app called When Is Good, .net. And sorry, that's just my WhatsApp. Hang on, I've just got to close this down. And so, yes, fast forward 10 years. Sorry about that. Are you able to edit that out? I'm not sure.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Good. Fast forward 10 years. We're still at it, still building web applications. I'm working in politics, and really what happened was, and it was a very rational choice at the end of the day. What really happened was my decision. I was in my mid-30s. Was I going to? How was I going to spend my time? Actually, that would be the transferable question that anybody would want to ask themselves. Did I want to spend my time working in government, working in politics, and trying to make a difference at a national level or government level or public policy level, whatever I thought I was doing? Or do you want to make a difference in building up a company? And to me at the time, it just felt more interesting building YouCanBookMe, which at the time was probably doing, it was probably only doing about £50,000 a year, like very little, but £50,000 a year is a full-time salary for many people. That is, and this was 10, 12 years ago. So
Right.
it was enough to demonstrate that we had customer growth, customer traction, and product market fit, because we were growing so fast as part of the tool. So I had a choice about, we've been doing this for a long time. We've been building and launching products for a long time. We've now got YouCanBookMe that is settled into a very identifiable pattern. The same kind of business and customer is finding our tool organically, signing up and giving us money without us having to do anything. All we need to do is keep building the tool and do the customer service, and away we go. And then I think that then what happens is you build momentum, and it takes on a life of its own, because I've often said that it's not one single thing that you do. You have to build a product, which involves software and engineering and development and structure and DevOps and design and UI and UX and hosting and the whole full stack of it. So that's one thing. You have to build a business, which is, how are you going to make money from that thing that you've just built? Are people going to give you money for it? And is that money going to be enough to pay for the cost it's cost you to build it? And then you have to build a company around it, because as soon as you start employing people, as soon as you create people infrastructure, so hiring and roles and responsibilities and salaries and benefits and holidays, and targets and OKRs, that, and corporately, your entity. We have two entities in YouCanBookMe, one in the UK and one in America, but we have a very broad range of solutions for how we hire people. So how to hire people and build up a company, and all of the other logistics and operations and accountancy. I mean, I'm listing them all now like it sounds like it's really hard work, but you don't just suddenly get dropped into it and suddenly have to do it all. You build it up slowly over time. So after a while, you realize that the company that you build, as you said, we're around $5 million ARR now. We've got a very ambitious plan to double our revenue in the next couple of years, which I think we can do. But so fast forward, and you're running a multi-million-pound software company. And to be honest, it kind of surprises me as well, because I think I've only just left my old career behind, and I'm now just getting into my stride.
Right. Oh, I loved how this is the most down to earth, and I think the most realistic idea behind building a product. We wanted to buy a house. I mean, I totally always appreciate, when it's like we want to change the world, we wanted to satisfy our customers, we wanted to solve a problem. Those are very good reasons, but I think mostly it's just something way easier. Usually it's just, yeah, it's something you want to do to do something with your life, to change it, to buy a house. So that's perfect. Thank you for being so honest about it. So let's dig into this whole operational thing that you're not being thrown into, right? But it piles up, right? And even if it's just slowly getting there, now you have to deal with all of it, right? So at some point you do have all the things that you just said in front of you to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So at what point did you think that maybe it was too much, and maybe we need to scale? Maybe it's not just the two of us anymore. We need somebody to take over, to delegate and scale.
So I can answer that question quite specifically. You Can Book Me, the first version, was launched in 2011. And by the end of that year, we had already taken on a part-time freelance customer support person. And also in the summer of 2012, we had a developer working alongside Keith on it. So we'd already borrowed money and started to use some of the proceeds of our customer sales and spend it on. So we basically, everything that we made from the company, we put back into paying for investment in the company, which meant employing some contractors, one of whom still works for us one way or another. So it's amazing in terms of a journey that she's gone on with us. I was at the job that you alluded to before. That was my full-time job that I did between 2011 and 2012. So I was in full-time work for that year, whilst You Can Book Me was getting up to a point where I think the expression is ramen profitability. So as I said, we were doing $2,000 or $3,000 a month. It was enough to pay off the overdraft that we'd used to help fund some of the additional development work that we wanted. And we just scraped by. And then for another couple of years after that, I gave up my full-time job exactly a year after. So in October 2012 was my first year as being CEO of You Can Book Me. And at that point, we already had a company because we'd been putting consultancy work through the company. We changed the name of the company. We started to hire people and formalize some of that relationship in 2013. And then that was 10 years ago, and we've never looked back since then.
Okay. And was there a point when you decided that you're not going to go after investors' money, that you are going to bootstrap? Was that from the very beginning, or was it at the point when you realized you are growing enough to not go there?
No, we've never felt that we're growing enough and doing well enough to not consider funding, because I think it should always be a question. I think that the fact is that funding is just simply it's a tool that you need to always consider as a possibility. It doesn't matter about whether you're bootstrapping or funding or borrowing or doing whatever. What matters is what do you need the money for, and what would you spend it on, and what would you get for your money. So in some ways, we did consider funding. We had meetings with angels. We went and had a couple of meetings with some VCs. God knows what they thought of us, but they certainly didn't try to overwhelm us with cash. It's not like we've never turned down a formalized funding offer. We never got that far. But one of the reasons why we always hesitated is because we just didn't quite know what we would do with the money. And I can totally see now in hindsight, how you see people calling themselves serial entrepreneurs or second time founder, or they exit from one and then they immediately start a new business. It's because it's so addictive. Once you know and understand how to solve the problems and what you're doing, it becomes addictive, because it's a matter of pain and regret. When I look back at 2011, 2012, how little I knew, the incredible community that we have now, even LinkedIn, the amount of wisdom that you can access pretty quickly nowadays because of the absolute explosion of content marketing and events and online, means that, I was hungry for talking to somebody who could have recognized what we were doing at the time and given us some good advice. So it could have gone a very different way, but basically we were on our own, not really understanding the context of the thing that we had in front of us. So as a result, we moved a lot more slowly commercially and from a business perspective than we probably could have done had we had funding and support and advice. But it was because I just thought, well, I'd rather make £1 million slowly than spend £1 million fast and waste it. So we did just choose to take the harder, rockier path, essentially allowing ourselves more room to make a mistake, because if we did make a mistake, it would just be me and Keith's assets that would be under pressure. If we'd borrowed money, then it would have to be me working to pay it back, or likewise Keith would have had to go into contracting, or we'd have had to exit the tool at a loss or whatever. But I didn't want to be in a situation where I was having to face people I'd taken money from that I couldn't pay back. So I think that's probably quite a fairly prosaic position that I take about money and borrowing, which I don't think is necessarily good business advice.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, once you're taking the money, you're no longer just working for your product and for your
Yeah,
customers, you're also working for the investors.
yeah.
So obviously that changes the whole setup in the company and the mindset of the founder, right? So what is the mindset of a bootstrapping founder, right? Like what
Well, I
have
think
you
actually, yeah, I think you can answer this question using research. So there's a book called The Innovator's Dilemma by Noah Wasserman, I think, and he talks about the difference between a desire to be king or to be rich. And I believe it's based on a Harvard Business Review. And if I've got any of these details incorrect, then somebody has to correct us. But um, the point the research that they did was they looked at, let's say, I have no idea, like 100 companies, publicly listed companies, and they looked at the root of those companies and based on ownership, control, and so on, and how shared was the ownership. And what the conclusion was that was evidenced by the review was that companies that share ownership, that take on investment, that have external boards and accountability, um, tend to essentially go on to be bigger and more successful and richer companies. Whereas companies where the founder has decided to either be bootstrapped or keep control or uh, yes, or not share power internal to their company, they have a lot of control. This is true, but they don't tend to make as wealthy companies as companies that go on the track that we'd all recognize. So that's the choice. Do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? And I think it's very personal. I don't think that you can have a 1% slice of £100 billion, or you can have 100% of a billion. I think like you you choose what you want to do in your life. It's your day. It's you wake up in the morning and decide how much you want to spend your day, doing your own ideas or carrying out somebody else's ideas or trying to make other people carry out your ideas, or like it's all about persuasion and influence with other people and how you want to work. And I guess at the time, for probably personal reasons as well as reasons to do with my own strengths and weaknesses, I'm essentially a control. I like to think of myself as being a benevolent control freak. So I do want to control things.
Okay, all right. So, what kind of rules and what kind of I don't know, like control panel have you had over these years set up for yourself and for the company that that helped you bootstrap it to 5 million ARR? Is it
Well,
like
very easy. Don't spend any money if you can help it, because you don't have any. Um, so yeah, I think that this is it. There's a point there where I did a talk in Boston in business and software years ago, like 5 years ago, where I did a presentation on various things to do with dealing with people. And the thing that I said was um, that hiring the wrong people will have the biggest impact on your success or failure of your company. And because it's not just some kind of recruitment process or offering somebody a job and hoping that they work for you. It is the ecosystem that it sits on top of. And the ecosystem is about culture, processes, rituals, values, and ambition, vision, and mission, and that kind of thing. So essentially, if you hire the wrong person, and this is what I said in the conference, um, the worst thing that can happen to your company is that the wrong people will spend your money on the wrong things. And so that's it. The wrong people will spend your money on the wrong things. Or when I say my money, I actually mean customer money. So if you're bootstrapped, the only money you've got comes from customers. And to see people that you've perhaps shouldn't have hired spend that money on something that is not going to put value back into your company, and continue on the path to profit, is kind of the most painful experience. And I met somebody just last year who'd seen that conference talk, and I hadn't met him, but 5 years later he remembered who I was. He said, "We quote you all the time. We say it's not their money. It's not their money." And it's a very, very brutal way of putting it, but he loved it because it summed up the issue here that if you're bootstrapping your company, ultimately you have to take care of money, and you have to protect it, and you have to value it for what it can do for you. So you can use money to buy services or labor or save you time or fix a problem, but you can also spend an enormous amount of it that won't do any of those things, and that's what you have to look at. So even now, we are in a very small office here in Bedford in the UK. I don't like spending money on things that don't seem to me to put any value back into the customer experience of the product or the experience of the people working in the company. So now we're a lot more generous, but at the beginning, I was very frugal with everything we said and did, and if we could get away with not doing it, we didn't do it. And that's it. You can't judge your own spending habits in your company by what other people are doing when they have millions of pounds and you've got nothing. So you have to remodel your, if you like, your sort of sense of purpose. It's like living next to a next door neighbor that lives in a mansion, and you've got your plot of land. So you've just got to make use of what you've got. Make do and mend would be the expression.
Right. So this is also like a difference in mindset. When you've got all the VC money in the world, then you can just spend it. And if you need another tool, then it's okay to buy it. And if another employee doesn't like it, but likes another one with pretty much the same setup, then well, let's buy this too. So yeah, I completely understand it. But what would be the things that you would never be frugal about? Like, what would you
Good question.
would
So
yeah.
yeah, good question. Frugal, I'm always going to be frugal. So it's like in
Okay.
comparison, you know,
Right.
we've always prioritized the employee experience as far as we possibly can. So even when we were only, 1 or 2 million, or probably, I don't know, 1.5 million ARR, but a team that was still, we'd only just made profit, we'd only just broken even. We took the company, we started to fly the company around in terms of bringing them over from America and Europe into the UK to Bedford. Or the first time, I think, was in 2017, we went to Lisbon. And then after that, we've gone to some really nice places. So we've been to Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. We've been to the south of Spain 2 or 3 times. And actually this summer, in a couple of months' time, we're going to the south of France. And it's obviously, as we've grown as a team, it's got more and more expensive. So, suddenly the first time you do it costs £10,000 and you think that's fine. And then it's a bit of an intake of breath when you realize you've just spent £50,000-60,000 on something. And that's a hell of a lot of money. It's an enormous amount of money. So why would we do that? Why don't we just keep everybody behind, their co-working spaces? And the reason why is because the value to the company and the employee experience is so amazing when everybody's together in a week where I just believe that I've been on enough company dinners where everybody's paying for their own dinner. Like the worst thing is when you have to go to the Christmas dinner with your colleagues and then you have to pay for your own meal. Like I've been there. And I think that once you've asked your employees to come on something which the company is paying for, you should just go for it. Pay for the drinks, get them, working together on trips, doing nice things. And then what happens is that by the end of that week, come Monday morning when they're all back at work, they're all back in there because we're a remote company. So this is obviously fun and exciting for a lot of people because they don't get a chance to hang out. Your productivity, energy, connections, it all just boosts on Monday. We were so lucky before COVID that we had just been to the Dominican Republic. So we had just been to the Caribbean. We'd had one of these kind of weeks. And then we got back, and literally a month later, we locked down. And then we didn't see anybody for 2 years. And you really could see the difference over 2 years of people not getting together because people are social. They want to hang out with each other. So that's something I've never stinted on. In time, putting the opportunity of time and pleasure back into the employee's experience of working for you, which doesn't have a monetary value, but it has a huge cultural value and it's really appreciated. And so whenever we can afford to, we've done it.
Oh, I mean, in the end of the day, it does have monetary value because people stay with you, people are happy, and
Mm,
instead of like rehiring new people that were not happy and
exactly.
teaching them again, yeah. So obviously, that's amazing. But yeah, you just said that you're full remote, and again, something super important right now, like people do not want to go back to the offices, no matter um, how scared they were at first to go home and work from home. So how did you move, or maybe if you offered this kind of remote setup from the very beginning, how did you structure it, and why did you decide that this is the setup that you want to work with?
So it was very much related to saving money because um, I'm not quite sure how we would have done it if we had pursued an office in Bedford or London. We would have had to pay, at the time, unimaginable rates of pay for people who are software developers working in London. I mean, they're still very high. Um, but for us at the time, there was no way we could afford to pay for a full-time developer. We could afford to pay for contractors and a sort of a mix and match. But at the time, I mean, now it's so much more of a flexible labor market. But 10 years ago, um, maybe also because of my inexperience, I didn't know how we were going to be able to find somebody where we are in Bedford, because anybody who's a software developer who lives in Bedford will be working for a company in London. So you're dealing with London, one of the most expensive capital cities in the world, and we're a tiny little software company, without any funding. So if we had then sort of taken on £1 million of funding, well, then it's like, okay, great, now we can go ahead and we can hire, a team and get going. Which I guess would have been the option for us. But instead, what we did was we looked around for people who we could afford. And so, of course, the labor, I think it's changed again a little bit now, but rates of pay for software developers in Spain and Portugal and obviously Eastern Europe are much more comparable and within our ability. It was just simply within our ability to afford incredible engineers, but at the same time offer a kind of a path in our company that gave them an enormous amount of experience working up, um, learning how to grow the tool that we've grown with a number of people. So we had basically a very exciting tool to work on, very fast moving and growing, and loads of customers, international, mostly in America, in terms of scheduling. So we had all of the kind of thrill and glamour of an international global SaaS tool, but we had the kind of working conditions and labor and employment protection and values of the European employment model. So we set up in Spain and we hired directly people in Spain. So everybody in Spain works, everybody in most of the company remotely works for us directly. So that means that they've got a YouCanBookMe payslip, they have YouCanBookMe social security, employment taxes, and benefits and protection. So that was really important to people who wanted to have a feeling that they had an employer that wasn't just based on a contract, on a freelance contract, for example. So that's how we built it up. And so because of that, it just required us to be remote because we weren't hiring anybody that was planning on moving to Bedford anytime soon, and we didn't want them to. So it suited our natural low cost, simple solution to stuff. So having an office and feeling like everybody needed to crowd into the office. We did have an office, not this one, but a different one, that did get full quite quickly with people that we had hired on a freelance basis to work for us in Bedford. But in terms of the first couple of serious remote employees, as well as Spain and Portugal, we also then hired people in America because we had needed to have customer success, customer support people interacting with most of our users that are in America. So we just never look back really. And then what you do is you start to evaluate everything about how you want to work with people, communicate, document policies and procedures, processes, and you just have to find tools and solutions that are set up for your arrangement. So the HR software that we've used for years now, and I love it still, Bamboo HR. The reason why we use it is because It's a very specific thing. They handle multi-currency fields for people. So if you've got people earning in dollars, euros, and sterling, you can put different, and I'm sure there's lots of other differentiators now, but at the time when I was looking at UK based HR software, because it's obviously predicated on UK employment law, it would just assume that you're in one time zone and one currency, which is no good. So I was like, no, this doesn't work. So you have to find the tools that actually speak your language in terms of what you want from a remote perspective. Once you do that, you just get very used to it and it starts to become a very normal thing.
Okay. All right. Well, that's perfect. And so it's right there in your DNA. So I want to go back a little bit into like the whole being frugal thing and being very careful about the money and where you spend it. Well, obviously you don't want to spend money just like that, but there are things that you have to spend it for, right? Um, so, what are the rules in the company that you use to determine whether or not you need to spend money on a certain
Um,
thing?
well, so here's a good one. Laptops. Laptops are often considered to be a kind of a status object, and it's very, very important to people because they have to work on a laptop. And um, the first laptops that we bought for people 10 years ago were Google Chromebooks. I mean, they were like 200 quid each, and they were just Google Chromebooks. And everybody was really pleased that they had something to work on, because at the point that I realized I needed to provide um, devices to people, it's like, okay, well, you just need to do cloud customer support tickets. Google Chrome is completely fine, and we don't have to spend the rest of the money. But then as you progress, you need to buy laptops for people, and my rules still are like, I'm on a MacBook Air. I think anybody in the company that's not a developer doesn't or designer doesn't need high processing power can just be on a MacBook Air. Whereas if you're a developer, you can be on a MacBook Pro or a higher spec machine. So I don't believe in spending an extra £1,000 on a laptop that's not necessary. And it doesn't matter to me that somebody might think of themselves as wanting to have the most expensive Mac spec that they can get for the status. They're probably not the right people for our company in the first place. So when laptops come back, or if people have left and we've got their laptops, it might be a new person starts and we'll say, well, you can use this laptop's 2 months old or something, and so you can use it. There's like, I think that you've got to be real, I mean, but then equally, every 3 years, one of our developers will say, "Oh, my laptop's, crapped out," and we go, "Okay, fine, we'll buy a new one." Like, we haven't got any problem about buying them. It's just that I'm not going to use them as a status symbol. They are a tool, and if you don't need something more than the minimum cost, then we're just going to get the minimum cost. I think that's probably, that's a very simple rule, but it's an example. And I think that's the way we think about a lot of stuff, which is, what's the purpose? What's the point? How does it feed back to how we're making money and how we're growing? And because what we haven't talked about, of course, is the corollary to bootstrapping is that you then end up creating profit. So I've probably been a lot more generous in the last 5 years since we've been profitable than I was in the first 5 years when we were making a loss. It makes a big difference. So if you have a big profit margin, you've got loads of money. So then you can afford to be. I certainly still wasn't buying expensive laptops at that point, but but you can say, look, we've got money here that we can invest in something. We're not scraping around now. I don't believe in, or I mean, plane travel.
Yeah.
I'd be flying economy, budget economy, whatever, backpacking 10 years ago, and now obviously when I fly, I tend to fly quite nice flights and daytime. Or I know it sounds ridiculous, but for European travel, I say to people, we're all going speedy boarding. Speedy boarding becomes this kind of the business travel of the European budget flyer. Because I recognize that when people are traveling around for us, I want them to get on and off planes and get on with their life because they're working for us. So the value of paying the extra amount of money for the tickets is worth it for the company and we can afford it. Whereas 7, 8 years ago, there's no way. I would just put them on the cheapest plane.
Okay, so it's about still it's about sorry, what was the word? The necessity, like the
Yeah, it's the value.
uh
It's the value.
value,
If you're, it's the
right?
value. So if you, because, so look, this is it, and this is sort of basic, kind of domestic economics almost. If you've got money in your bank account and you decide to spend in any kind of business, the money that's in your bank account, you decide to spend it on something. What you're really saying is, I am either spending this to protect the rest of the money in the bank account, or it's because I'm expecting for more than what I've just spent to come back. So in marketing, if I'm spending £1, I expect £2 to come back, at least £10 to come back usually. So what you can't just do is run an economy in your business where you're spending a lot of money and you don't see any reason, you don't see any value back into why you're spending it. You're either spending it to protect your assets of what you've got, or you're spending it to grow your assets. It's not, money isn't some kind of hobby or fun thing to do. Money is a tool like everything else, and we do it in our company. We do it for those two reasons. So if we were to take on funding, and I certainly wouldn't rule it out, but if we were to take on funding, it would be because we decided that we want to spend more money than we have on growing our asset.
Okay, not the fancy stuff.
Precisely.
Okay, all right. So let's talk a bit about you as a leader, as a CEO, and that was your, still is, right? Your first CEO job, right? So
Yes.
what was the main lesson that you had to learn as the CEO, and how did you grow, well, yourself and the company with this structure?
I think there's things that I'm naturally very good at, which make me a good CEO, which I didn't learn, but I certainly developed, like being strategic, um, and organizing things. I think the thing that I've had to learn is people and working with people, because as I said before, half your job is about influencing and persuading people to do things that you want them to do. And in like in life, it is a combination of hard diplomacy and soft diplomacy. So soft diplomacy would be company culture, company benefits and incentives, working on an interesting problem, um, being given lots of room to progress as a person, um, and then hard diplomacy would be, this is what we're paying you, this is what we expect, these are what your benefits are, this is the deal that you're getting, and then this is the deal if it doesn't turn out the way we want it to be. And so I've always had a kind of a combination of both. Of the company is run to a fairly tight set of standards in terms of policies and procedures. We're not an anarchic company. We're not flat management or a pick and choose what you want to do. We try to keep the company as quite a sort of, it's quite a conservative company structure in that sense. Like, we have managers, we have policies and procedures, we have a 9 to 5. I'm not trying to be a break the mold of what people perceive the office to be like. But on the other hand, we invest in our soft diplomacy around our company culture, our values, and ownership over the work that people do. It's very important, because that's what high performing problem solvers want to do. They want to be able to see that the work that they do goes into production. They don't want to they're not academics. They don't want to sit around thinking about the perfect things to do. They want to actually see them be done. And there's some exceptional examples of that inside our company, in the sense that we have some amazing people who work for us who do that, and you can see, oh, that's all great. But there's also some unfortunate painful failures, which, if you ask me what is the most painful thing about being a CEO of a company like YouCanBookMe, it's when we don't get it right with people, when we let people down. And that can happen, last week, it can happen 10 years ago. It doesn't mean that You don't just get better and better and better, and then you never make mistakes. You're always going to make some form of person mistake, and it's always going to impact somebody in a way that you wish it hadn't. And that's for me, learning how to still maximize what I'm trying to achieve and minimize the pain associated with it, because people are the hardest thing and the best
Right.
thing. They're the best thing as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so are you a hands-on CEO, or is it after like 10 years you are on this more strategic, observing, inspiring kind of role? Are you trying to make yourself useless in a way in the company?
Yeah.
And
So, very good question. I think everybody, there's lots of different opinions about this. So this is just my take on this, which is the spectrum between being a big picture thinker, an inspirer and talker, and then being an absolute hands-on operator where you're delivering and you're all over the details. I fall some way halfway between the two. And I personally think that any leader, and I'm not just talking about a CEO, but any C-level leader inside a company that's in charge of a department or a whole company, group of people, should have the capacity to understand the detail of what it is that they're asking other people to do, if that's required. So in my time, I have learned about American corporate law or accountancy requirements for R&D or workplace pensions, or I was looking today at understanding payment processing fees and understanding MasterCard and Visa, platform charges versus pay. I mean, you can disappear into rabbit holes all the time if you come from an operator background, and to an extent, I do. But if you're not able to lift your head and see the bigger picture strategically, or to know where you're going, then you're not going to be able to kind of make a progression to being a strategic leader. So I think that the answer is, I did do an awful lot of direct delivery and operation in a lot of years, and I'm still the fallback on stuff. But laterally, in the last couple of years, I've hired a full-time HR, full-time finance manager, a full-time compliance manager, and I also have a COO, a chief operations officer. So I've actually now expanded my operations team to do all those jobs. So I was actually making people laugh at lunchtime today, because I was saying how when I was at the conference at New York last week, it was my colleague Jonathan who paid for everything with his card. I mean, this is just, I love this. Like, I'm not the one that has to pay for the lunches anymore. So I like that. I like not having to do that. But I think being strategic means that you're always living in a little bit in the world of, well, where are we trying to get to? And I'm trying to do a lot more bridging between where I think we need to get to and what we're aiming to do over the next year and 2 years, and what that involves, with a certain amount of reflection on my journey, which I kind of want to put to bed. So I'm like, I know about how to do that. I've worked on that. I did all of the details. This is what I've learned. These are the things that I think we need to retain in how I've done it. And strategically, I'm going to assume we are doing it like that in order for us to get further on. So you have to learn how to be responsive to new details, to new circumstances. So you can't just get fixed in what you're really good at doing and used to doing, because then you're not going to be able to change. So I think that so basically, yes, I think you always, there was somebody else said this about boots or shoes, some form of footwear, that you always have to be wearing boots that are slightly too big for you. I mean, I'm not saying I'm too big for my boots. The boots are too big for me, is what I'm saying. So if you're always inhabiting a space that always feels a little bit bigger than you've felt your competence takes you up to this point, you always know where you're trying to expand into. And then you get to a point where there's a tension between your ability to get everybody to expand into the space versus delivering what we're having to do today. So it's a today, tomorrow kind of balance. And I'm definitely moving more in the tomorrow kind of world in my role than the today world, because we've done an awful lot of hiring recently in the last couple of years of people who can basically deliver today.
Okay, awesome. I think that's a brilliant roadmap. Thank you for sharing it. So, just a couple more questions, and the usual question that I always ask is, what's your biggest win and biggest failure as a CEO or as a company?
I think that our biggest win is our commercial success, which I'm very proud of. We have over 20,000 customers. YouCanBookMe is one of the top 3 scheduling tools in the industry, used by millions of people. We have over 1.5 million bookings every month on the tool. It's widely known, not just in Europe, but mostly in North America. It's used by almost every university and school in America, and thousands of small businesses rely on YouCanBookMe. And we're expanding and we're growing. So that relationship with customers has been something that I've never done before in my previous careers, and I treasure it. You know, it's a deep form of satisfaction to know that you've built a successful business with a relationship with that many customers. That we serve those customers. It's their money that we spend, and we want to do right by them and keep investing in the tool to make it better. So that's what we do. So it's investment in that relationship and the quality that has seen us through so many years. And I think that would be what I would be most proud of. I mean, I obviously am proud of the tool and the solution and the kind of things that we're doing. We're doing at the moment to bring it up to speed in terms of some of the stuff I think we can adapt to what people need in scheduling. So I think I'm proud of the solution, but I think that the business around the solution that's built that relationship up with all those customers is something it was our job. That was my job to do that. So I'm glad we did it. Biggest
Great.
failure.
It's usually the harder one.
Yeah. So I mean, it's hard because the trick that Peldy from Balsamic always has is to say that he doesn't think of himself as failing ever, because every lesson, everything that turned out not to be how he expected, he just turns into a lesson that he learns from. So then by definition, you can't fail. And I think also, you don't want to catastrophize failure in what you're doing as a business, because nobody ever said you're just going to go forward, make every decision correctly. So basically, failure is inherently a part of running a business. So you can't run a business without failures. So therefore, in the common terminology, it's not a failure because it's that you couldn't avoid it. It's just you have profit and loss. There's always a loss to a profit. You can't have one without the other. I think, though, I would go back to what I said before, which is I think that we probably lost too much ground and too much money in the early years because of our inexperience, and we hired the wrong people. And essentially, by hiring some of the wrong people early on, they ended up doing quite a lot of damage to our early prospects, which I regret, it feels like a failure. It's something that systemically we've obviously looked at again, and everything I talk about hiring and culture since then has basically been informed by that experience. But I think that's probably the feel. If it was a sort of, oh God, if I could have just not done that, it would have been that period. One thing I
Awesome.
would say was a mistake that we made, which we're still paying for now, that is definitely avoidable, is don't build your own bespoke billing and subscription software solution. Get something off the shelf. You can't. It's just impossible. We've got one in house. It wasn't our intention to have one in house. It was a long story about why we have one in house, but we really need to move away from that and move to a system where we're dealing with a third party software solution. I think, generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, either go for no code or integrated or automated solutions for things, but avoid trying to build bespoke software for every problem you're trying to solve inside the company, and try to go for really, really good solutions. Like if you're scheduling, a scheduling solution, but don't try to build
Yeah.
everything. That we hear it all the time with YouCanBookMe when people are looking at it and they go, "Oh, I could probably do that myself." And yeah, you probably could build a scheduling tool yourself, but then suddenly you have to start maintaining a scheduling tool inside your company, and that's for us. That was what we did with billing and subscription software, and we have to maintain it, and it kind of saves us money because we're not paying them 3 or 4%, on our revenue fee. But I can see now longer term scalable. We need to switch out of that.
Absolutely,
I'm going
absolutely
to get
agree.
loads of demos now from salespeople saying, "Ooh, try our tool."
Yes, absolutely. But this is something that I bring from my previous company that I worked for. We would always say, and it's a platform where you can, just like you said, integrate all the best systems and tools out there. So there are. Uh, there is Slack, there is YouCanBookMe, there is
Yeah,
Stripe, there's like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just need a platform that allows you to plug in all the best tools around your solution, whatever you're building. So 100% agree. If you can get by um, just plugging in something that's already there, yeah, just do it. But awesome. I just have one last question, and also just because everyone's absolutely crazy about the latest news. So crypto is, I don't know, making a comeback, not making a comeback. AI is there. Also, no one knows what to do with it. Financial institutions crashing. So a ton of
end of the
things.
world.
Right.
Is the question is your question, are these
is
the end of day?
it is it the end of the world? No, not really. But which one do you think? What is the trend or a piece of news that is going to inevitably have the biggest
Oh,
effect?
that's easy. That's
Yeah.
easy. That's AI. That's chat GPT. I mean, that is what we're
Okay.
seeing right now is the equivalent of the printing press. I think it's going to be, it'll have more impact than the printing press. This technology and how it changes our interaction with knowledge and learning and literacy and communication is as impactful as the printing press. And what is fascinating about it is the exponential change that you can see as a result of this technology being launched. The number of it's the technology that's launching 1,000 software startups and solutions, but it also means that people who are born in the last 10 years or so, who will then be experiencing the world that has been written by AI as opposed to being written by humans, will experience a very, very different world, because it's got an epistemological basis to it, which is, how do we know things? Where does knowledge come from? So previously we were in this very mechanical transactional relationship, which knowledge exists on the internet. We go in there, and a company like Google, for the price of showing us an advert, will serve that information to us in the form of search results. That is totally different to knowledge being assembled through that kind of billion form of pattern recognition that AI does, and presenting back to us our own information, but presented in a way that actually changes the way we think about that information. And I think that is the key philosophical point there, which is that the access to the information, in the same as the printing press, vastly and exponentially increases the amount of knowledge and learning that's available to the human being. So in developing countries in Southern Africa or in Asia, South America, where they're not really, even out of the gate in terms of a lot of access that we have in countries like Britain in terms of Wi-Fi and broadband and devices and phones and all the rest of it. They've got phones. They will be now using AI to access knowledge and power and functionality, stuff that they can do, that gives them 100 years worth of development suddenly, today, instantly. It's now here. So the way the printing press suddenly meant that the Bible and every other book could be in people's houses, and everybody could start reading, and you're not relying on monks writing it out. It's bad for the monks, but it's great for everybody else. It could be about, for example, medical changes, so medical procedures, and understanding and accessing public health strategies will change because of ChatGPT. Clinical diagnosis, everything to do with understanding the causes of chronic diseases. These are the kind of things that you could then apply to public policy level, that will give people an exponential gain in benefiting than they would have done had they been waiting in line for an older fashioned way of delivering that kind of healthcare. But it's also about changing the nature of knowledge itself. So knowledge basically stops being. What they've done is ChatGPT has made knowledge dynamic. It changes according to the type of query and building block that you have. So it isn't about all our knowledge now lives in these distinct and mutually exclusive units like a book or a web page. Knowledge is now being merged and brought together by this third party intervention, the AI bot, and it is presenting information in a dynamic, analytical way. And that's going to change what people learn.
Do you think that maybe it still needs to change a little before we can use it in healthcare? And because I'm a very big supporter. Like, I use it pretty much every day. Honestly, I think for content creators, it's an amazing tool. Absolutely, like, seriously. But even I don't use it for anything serious, let alone, I don't know, feeding it the symptoms of my son's illness or anything. But it does give you very weird results sometimes. It does give you a very distorted, very, I don't know, how to say, like, there are a lot of holes in the, like, the knowledge that it has.
But by its very nature, though, those are the holes that maybe we detect now, but exponentially in a year or 2 years' time, those holes will be fixed. I see that as being just a symptom of essentially a natural byproduct of how this thing's worked in the first place. It's not like we've built a perfect product, we've rolled it out, and we now have a few QA bugs that we have to fix. The very nature of it means it's going to get better and better over time. But I just think, I think that perhaps underlying some of your concern might be that it might just, it might just be this sort of bubble or kind of like something that might just be too extreme in one sense and not helpful in another sense. And it might be that we're all praying for climate change and just, put an end to the world and humans altogether, because essentially it's either between AI or climate change, and one of them is going to kill us. So we just have to decide what it is. I don't have a particularly positive view on the future of the human race generally. So we might as well go down in some kind of artificially intelligenced, created flames.
Right. So feed them enough empathy so they kill us softly.
Exactly. We go down and we're awash with too many blog posts.
Yes. Okay. All right. That's been amazing. Great. Great to learn how and again, the question of AI is raised a lot during the podcast. So I do have a lot of opinions to deal with. So, but that one, yours is very interesting. I think I've never. I have to go back there. I have to use ChatGPT right now.
Feed in the transcript of this thing into
right.
ChatGPT, and then we'll live in a kind of a real meta, apocalyptic world where you feed in my words into ChatGPT. Why do they have such a stupid name? Would be my only criticism of it. Like, can we get a snappier name?
Yeah.
Feed in all my words, ask it what it thinks. It suddenly knows the possibility of destroying all known knowledge and whatever else, then starts to learn how to do it, then basically achieves the goal,
Right.
and it will finally eat itself.
That's the spirit. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Bridget. I mean, everything that you said today was absolutely amazing. Thanks for sharing your experience and your thoughts about the trends and the future of humanity. But
I think all good conversations end on the future of humanity.
right.
I think if you haven't covered it at least once every day, then you're not paying attention.
Yeah, you're not living. Right.
Well,
I
thank you very
already.
much for inviting me on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bridget. I mean, it's been an honor, and all the best with You Can Book Me.
Thank you, and hello to everybody watching this, and thank you very much for being such a supportive SaaS community.
Thank you, and take care.
Bye. Bye bye.